What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Today, I have a special friend with me, Lawrence Owen. You guys have seen him on this channel before. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well, doing well. Actually, more news this past couple weeks since the draft than I expected it to be. I thought this was going to be a very big lull in content creation between, the draft and OTA slash minicamp. But news keeps popping in, and that's why we're here right now.
Absolutely. You're right. I mean, the Colts made news earlier this week signing Philip Lindsay, and that was definitely a shocker. And now another one coming out, and this is reported by Zach Kiefer earlier this afternoon, saying that the Colts are indeed working to add veteran quarterback Nick Foles. Nothing has been done yet. Says that there is a chance, though, it comes by the end of next week. I talked to you before the podcast. I said that Cody and I talked about this a little bit last week, saying how it kind of made sense in a way. And that's what Kiefer said as well. And I think a lot of people also have that same sentiment. It kind of would make sense to bring Nick Foles into the fold now. You said something interesting, that you said that it wasn't a good idea last year for us to do it, but you said this year now might be the time to do it. Can you explain to the viewers why that is?
Well, last year the circumstances just wasn't a very good situation to bring Nick Foles in the same building with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz being the starter, Foles being the backup. With all that transpired during the both those guys' times in Philadelphia, Foles getting the statue, Wentz going through the situation that ultimately ended up him leaving the team. It just wasn't a good situation. Like I told you, people are running around saying, their comeback for that was, hey, these are professional athletes. It's a job. You put those kind of things, on the side burner and go do your job. But you got to remember, these are human beings as well. They're not robots. They go out there, they have to deal. You and I'm sure everybody out there has worked with people in situations, whether they like the person or not like the person. It just brought bad feelings up, and you don't need that kind of stuff going on in the locker room. So last year was not a good idea, whereas this year, I think, you have a Matt Ryan. He's an Iron Man guy, someone who is, missed 3 games in 14 seasons, right? And it's not like he doesn't never get hit. He gets hit a lot. He's an Iron Man. He doesn't miss games. I wouldn't want Foles as a starter, but as a backup, a guy who could come in case, knock on wood, something drastic happens and he's got to go out there and play a game or two. You need someone out there that can go out there and win you a game. Chris Ballard learned this back in 2019, after the, God forbid, situation with Andrew Luck happened. You didn't have a good backup at the time, and look what happened, right? So he knows and understands the situation. The timing last year wasn't right. Frank Reich and Foles does have that history over in Philadelphia. He even came out last offseason and said, hey, I love Nick Foles. I think he's a great quarterback. He's not our quarterback. He's on another team right now. And also, I think a little bit of what I had to say just a moment ago had something to do with it. But now, yeah, absolutely, man. I may not want Foles as my starter long term, but I think he's a guy that could absolutely come in and give you quality snaps at quarterback for a couple games.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking a little bit about it, and I think the common notion that a lot of people are describing now is the urgency to find that really good backup quarterback for a team, even in like a situation when you have your franchise guy. Sometimes it can be a very important thing to have that, because we have seen teams, especially over the last few years, make Super Bowl runs with their backup quarterbacks. And Nick Foles was one of the reasons why that argument came into play. So it's like, if you have the system in place, you really feel comfortable with bringing a guy in like that. And you mentioned it, Nick Foles has history with Frank Reich, right? It makes total sense there. He fits the scheme. He understands how it is. Is there any other reason why you would think that a guy like Nick Foles taking the backup quarterback spot for Indy is a good idea. Because I think a lot of people are hesitant because they seem to think, oh, well, Nick Foles' best football is behind him. Why not just give Sam Ellinger a shot? I hear that so many more times, and I see your face reacting to it. I understand. Why don't you explain to everyone why having Nick Foles as a backup quarterback option is the best thing for the Colts to do at this point?
Nick Foles is a proven commodity at backup. Like I said, I don't want him as a starter, but as a backup, a guy who can come in and play a game or two, maybe three, a couple games here and there, even in high pressure situations, even if he has to come in, in a wild card game or a divisional, championship game or something. He's been there, done that, played the Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl, so he understands that situation. And I like the fact that, you're not going to have to rely on him to be a long-term starter. So I would much rather have a proven commodity than a guy who, in my opinion, is a great guy. And Sam Ellinger is a very good guy to have for someone who's going to go out there and do a couple plays every game, just to mix things up. Right. But I don't want him being a guy who's going to take every snap for a game. I've watched this guy in training camp, and contrary to what a lot of people are saying, in my opinion, from what I saw with my own eyes in training camp, he is not an NFL starter yet. I mean, God only knows what happens this training camp. Maybe he's completely and utterly improved and is able to get zip on the ball, and his accuracy is better and grows about 4 inches. But I like him as a guy who is an emergency. He'd be fine as the third string quarterback. I think he's perfectly fine with that. Or, gadget plays, catching another team off guard or something. I don't want him taking long-term snaps at quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. I would not like the idea of thinking about, oh my goodness, Matt Ryan's went down with an injury. Now Sam Ellinger is going to have to play 3, 4, 5 games in a row. Do you guys remember seeing preseason last year against third string guys where he was throwing interceptions left and right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's against third stringers.
Yeah. I think people are so eager to hear the next Tom Brady sort of thing, right? Like, I mean, guys, there has been very few quarterbacks ever in the history of the NFL that have been 6th or 7th round quarterbacks that have ever gone on to have any major success in the NFL, let alone to have success like what Tom Brady's doing. That was a once in a lifetime opportunity to see with a legendary coach and a legendary system, everything aligned. We're just not, I don't think that even Tom Brady did a lot of things at Michigan better than what Sam Ellinger did at Texas. And the one thing that Tom Brady also had was arm strength. He can actually throw the football 50 yards down the field accurately at that time. So,
and it wasn't a rainbow,
Yeah, it wasn't a rainbow one. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, going back to the stats when it comes to Nick Foles, over the last 4 seasons, that's what he's been, as a backup for every situation. And his worst season, was just basically last year because he only played in 1 game. And he even then still threw 24 of 35 for a touchdown and 250. I'll be honest, that might not blow the rocks off of any stat sheet person, but I don't know if Sam Ellinger is going to do that consistently against NFL defenses right now.
Yeah, look, I'm not trying to trash the man, okay? I think Sam Ellinger has the tools to be a long-term NFL player, just not necessarily a starter. He'll be that, that Taysom Hill kind of role. You know what I mean? That backup third string quarterback guy who can go out there. Heck, you never know. You might end up seeing him suit up. I hate putting this out there, like a Tim Tebow, suiting up at tight end occasionally and going out there and catching a few passes, or something of that. He is a very athletic young man.
Hmm.
but he's just not NFL quality starter. And you absolutely need something like that at the backup position.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, with the last few seasons, I mean, Nick Foles in the last 4 seasons in all of his games, he has thrown at least 64% completion percentage or higher in every season that he has played. I mean, again, for a backup quarterback, and you get a guy that's going to throw 65% completion percentage, he's going to throw more touchdowns than he does interceptions. Again, this is all backup here, folks. We're not saying that Nick Foles is going to do anything except ensure that if something were to happen, again, we go back to the argument of, do you believe that if Nick Foles were to come in and he had to be that emergency guy, he would, I don't think he would win you a football game, but he would certainly go far, not as far as to say he would lose you a football game.
Well, Nick Foles is kind of weird when it comes to an NFL player. From what, if you go back and you watch, you know, the progression of him throughout his career, if he only plays 3 or 4 games maximum or so, he plays those very high level. And
Mhm.
then anything past that, it's like he gets in his own head. He
Yeah.
starts making mistakes. He'll start throwing those deep balls when he shouldn't be throwing the deep balls and things of
Mhm.
that nature. He starts to look, I hate to say it, a little bit like Carson Wentz, and he's been in there too long,
Mhm.
when it comes to decision making and things of that nature. That's why he wasn't the long-term starter for the Bears, right? That's why
Mhm.
he didn't last with the Eagles. Because once he was in there and he played for a few games, the first few games not too bad. Then after that, he starts to make these mistakes that I don't. It has something to do in his head, but that's why I think he's going to make. He's a great career backup, and that's not knocking somebody. Guys like you and I and 99.9% of other people in the world are not going to be backup quarterbacks in the NFL, quality ones, and this guy is one, and I'm okay with having him in this situation.
Yep, absolutely. And you certainly hope that they be able to get him for, a team friendly deal to be able to shore up that position and maybe be able to fill one more spot on this roster. I know everyone is still talking about trying to acquire a veteran wide receiver at some point potentially. We will just have to see on that, but I mean, give kudos to Ballard here. I mean, even after the draft was over, you're right. Most of the time, Ballard's pretty quiet. Maybe we get a few guys here and there that now, again, we're not saying that the Nick Foles news is confirmed yet. I mean, something could happen in the next week and it might go away, maybe. But I mean, if Kiefer and a bunch of other national media people are also saying it, that it sounds like the initiative is that these two sides are trying to reach an agreement as is. But I mean, Ballard doing a fantastic job of not just settling after the draft, bringing in extra competition in the running back room, and now potentially being able to get one of the most, I think, one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And I love what Ballard's doing with this.
Oh, absolutely. And for those of you who are dead set on the, well, we need another veteran wide receiver, as you was talking about earlier. I He's been him and Frank Reich and Brady have been saying all offseason that they love their wide receiving room, right? I'm wondering, we probably won't see a big name or a veteran wide receiver signing until probably mid training camp once they get in the full pads.
Okay.
You know, that's the situation I'm looking at. That's when they're going to get a better idea of what they actually have with Matt Ryan throwing the football. That's when they'll make their final decision. And if a move happens, I think it'll happen before, like probably a week or so before the joint practices with the Lions, I would say, if
Yeah.
it's going to happen at all.
Gotcha. Well, guys, let me know in the comments what you think of the Colts showing interest in acquiring Nick Foles to be the backup quarterback. Let me know your thoughts on it. And thank you, Lawrence, for joining me and talking with me about it, man. It's always a pleasure.
Oh man, anytime that I am able to come on and join with you, I love talking football with you and Cody. So
I
Absolutely.
appreciate you, man. I appreciate you as always. Let me know, guys. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.
Go Colts. Have a good one.